Hello. So last week we were in Boston. This week we are back in London. Anything to talk about this week, Lizzie?
I don't know. Yeah, just 3 hours worth of Netflix to go through.
Welcome to the Royal Rota, your weekly podcast on all things royal from ITV. And this week we're talking about two former members of the royal family. And people often ask me, why do you talk about Harry and Meghan? They are no longer royal. You are a royal correspondent. Don't do it. Well, when Harry and Meghan are talking about their exit from the royal family, and they're talking about Harry's family and the Queen and what it was like and why they left and the press intrusion because she joined the royal family, that's why.
And also, I mean, they might have stepped back as working members of the royal family, but Prince Harry is still the king's son, and Meghan is the king's daughter-in-law. So they are royals. They are just not working royals. So
Quite often
yeah.
on Twitter, from all my lovely notifications, people always say, "Why do you still talk about Harry and Meghan?" Well, the reason why we do is because they've made basically a 6-hour series about their exit from the royal family, and they video diaried themselves out of the royal family as they did, which we've mentioned on this podcast before. That was our understanding, and hey presto, we had the confirmation, didn't we, in the Netflix series that Harry and Meghan did
Yep.
video diary themselves as they were leaving. In fact, I think episode one, series one of Harry and Meghan starts with him saying it's the something of March, and we've just completed our last engagement.
Yeah, he's at Heathrow, isn't he? And Megan's first video diary is from Vancouver, and Megan says in the docu-series that a friend had recommended to them to sort of document their time, and she says, "Oh, this is at one point she says this is my first one. I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know what we're going to do with them yet, but here they are, and they chart their time leaving the royal family."
They do, and they do lots of interviews and things as well. But it did strike me that they were saying, "Oh, I'm doing a video diary. Don't quite know why." It rather creates the impression that they always thought there would be a Netflix program in the offing at some point, provided that they could do the deal, which they clearly did, and they got getting lots of money for it. And good for them because they don't have any other source of income at the moment. So this is how they earn their money, by talking about their time in the royal family. And I mean, boy, did they talk about it. I mean, two clear themes, weren't there? One was race and one was press intrusion.
Yep. And I think that those are issues that they have spoken about at length on in other interviews, and things that they have done. So I don't, whilst those were serious issues that they addressed, I don't think we were surprised that they spoke about those issues in the series, were we?
No, and but, I mean, I think looking back now, and we'll talk about how we watched this at great speed on Thursday morning because Netflix dropped 3 episodes on Thursday at 8 o'clock. Um, oh, there's another three coming next week. I thought the royal family got off relatively lightly, if you can say that being accused of unconscious bias in the family is getting off lightly. Perhaps not, but I think there was no direct, specific allegation from Harry and Meghan over the 3 hours of the first three episodes.
No, I think in terms of if you think back to the Oprah interview, how damaging that was. I think you're right that we were expecting potentially it to be on that level in terms of kind of an attack on the royal family and the institution, and it wasn't. But we've still got another 3 episodes to go, don't we?
Haven't we? I mean, should we start by sort of playing some clips? Maybe we should play some clips of the video diaries to give you a little flavour of they look broken, to be fair, and I've absolutely no doubt it was a very traumatic time. But I think we should probably start off by saying whatever they said in these 3 hours and whatever they will say in the coming 3 hours, this is Harry and Meghan's side of the story. It is not a balanced forensic examination about who was to blame for their exit from the royal family. It's a whole bunch of people telling us about Harry and Meghan, and all from their point of view. No one is putting the palace side, and we'll talk about whether or not the palace was offered the chance to respond in a minute. But it's important to point out this is 6 hours of Harry and Meghan's story through their friends, through them, and their own interviews, and very much their side of the story.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of our presenters' lead-ins yesterday was the only way is Sussex, which is obviously if you're here in the UK, you'll know the reality show The Only Way is Essex. So we have got this is the Sussex's take, and it is very much their side of the story reflected in the interviews that they have included, but also the interviews that they have done throughout the series.
Hi, so we're here on Wednesday the something of March. We've just finished our 2 weeks, our final push, our last stint of royal engagements. It's really hard to look back on it now and go, what on earth happened? Like, how did we end up here?
H is in London and I'm here. I don't even know where to begin. Look at that. How would you describe it, Archie?
Like it's all beautiful.
It's so beautiful. Maybe this is the first video diary. I don't know. We've talked about it. We keep talking about it because we know that right now it might not make sense, but one day it will make sense.
So that was Harry and Meghan on their way out. I mean, it's interesting they use quite a bit of their children in there. In fact, I think let's just hear a little bit of Archie when he's standing. The image that we see is he's standing with his dad on some kind of balcony, and there are like hummingbirds sort of eating or flying that Harry is filming, and this is a little clip of Archie, and we're using it. It's from the Netflix documentary series, and clearly Harry and Meghan gave their permission for it to be used.
I gotta do this first, Mama, because I was with you.
Oh my god.
I gotta do this first.
You've got a dirty monster. Papa is a bird watcher, so this is a really big moment.
Harry and Meghan have been at great pains, haven't they, to protect the privacy of their children and not to put them in the public spotlight at all. But Harry speaks in the documentary about how they are doing it sort of. It's their choice and it's with their consent. It's they're under their control, and I think that is key to everything with Harry and Meghan. That they want to have control over the access to them, and with the children, though I was quite surprised, how much we saw of them given how little we've seen up until this point.
Yeah, it's entirely understandable. They want to do that. That's entirely their choice to do it, isn't it? But yeah, you're right. Given all the what they didn't like about being in the UK was being told that they should show their children to the media, or this is how we do it in the royal family, and after you have a baby you have to go and show everyone. But they're choosing to release this video on their terms. What about these substantive claims then? Because basically, I mean, Harry was talking about how from a very young age some of his earliest memories are being swarmed, to use his word, by the paparazzi. And that kind of theme continues, doesn't it? About how they were chased, how the lenses were everywhere, how he found that press intrusion intolerable. And it kind of went together with an argument from Harry, from Meghan, and from Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland, as well, that a lot of the negative coverage was all about race.
Yeah, I think, Harry has spoken before, and he speaks in this about how, he had watched what happened to his mother, and he didn't want that to happen to another woman that he loved. And we see this scene they're in a car driving through America, and they're talking about that their concern about being followed by a photographer. We couldn't see the photographer through the car, could we? But the scene is saying, "Oh, we're being followed," and it's Harry's fear that the same thing would happen to Meghan that happened to his mother. And that's one of the core reasons for Harry for wanting to remove themselves from the royal family.
Yes, but I mean, it's clear that leaving the royal family hasn't ended the paparazzi. Now, I'm not making an excuse for them because I don't think they should be doing it. But if their reasons for leaving the royal family was to remove themselves from that pressure cooker, if as it were, well, it's quite obvious from the documentary that here they are, they're allowing a camera for a start to film themselves in a car, again, yet their choice. But this is happening in the US, not in the UK, and they have already left as members of the royal family. Now, we don't know which publication had sent that member of the paparazzi out. Could have been an American publication like the National Enquirer, could have been a British tabloid, we don't know. Could have been TMZ, who knows? But someone was sending out a paparazzi photographer to chase them in a car, even though they've left the royal family.
Meghan talks, doesn't she, about those early days when it became public that her and Harry were together, and she says at the time she's living in Toronto, and she said that it felt like all of the UK media just descended on Toronto, waiting for me to do anything. And she was hearing from neighbours that they were having their doors knocked on, that neighbours were being paid to have live stream cameras pointing into her backyard. And she said she was talking about how kind of everything about her life felt so insular and that her face was everywhere, and Harry talks about how he felt so kind of helpless that he was thousands of miles away in the UK and unable to sort of protect her and look after her.
And that's when he released that statement to talk about the race issue not long after they announced their engagement. So it's from a very early period that he had concluded that this was all about race. Just have a listen to because Meghan, as we all know, her mother is black, her father is white, but she was talking about, she was in a car, she was just been talking about how her mother had once been racially abused with the N-word, but then she spoke about, well, she never really considered her race until she said she went to the UK. And then Harry follows that up by talking about how members of this royal family, of his own family, were saying, well, why should she get special protection? All of our other wives and girlfriends went through this. It's kind of a rite of passage into the royal family. It'll change. And Harry's response was, it's about race. So listen to this little section here. We'll play Meghan and then Harry and then Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland.
Obviously now people are very aware of my race because they made it such an issue when I went to the UK.
As far as a lot of the family were concerned, everything that she was being put through, they had been put through as well. So it was almost like a rite of passage. And I said, the difference here is the race element.
And I said to her, I remember this very clearly, that this is about race. And Meg said, Mommy, I don't want to hear that.
So clear, a very, very clear theme there. And it was articulated by some other contributors to the programme as well, who were kind of building a case that Britain is a product of its past, that Britain was built on empire and colonialism and slavery and the riches of slavery that helped build Britain, and how how there are still statues and paintings all across the country that talk about Britain's past like that. And if you are a person of colour, or even if you're not a person of colour, you might find that really, really offensive. And the programme was kind of making the point, wasn't it, Lizzie? And it even did so with by introducing Brexit, which angered the Daily Mail. That the Brexit, when Meghan joined, which is around the period of Brexit, was a time when the debate at least allowed people to talk about immigration.
I think one of the other you sort of touched on it there. One of the lines that's been picked up quite widely is on a number of the front pages this morning, is one of the interviews that they included from a contributor in the series, describing the Commonwealth as the Empire 2.0, and how hurtful that would have been for the Queen had she have been alive to hear that, because the Commonwealth is one of her how would you describe it, she felt one of her greatest achievements.
The Commonwealth had something like 9 members, didn't it, when she came to the throne?
And it's now 56 voluntary members.
But the case was that, well, the Commonwealth is kind of, this is the case being put put in a program. The Commonwealth is kind of like the empire because it keeps the rich nations rich and the poor nations poor, and it's just a club that was formed out of empire. Everyone says it's voluntary, but it's keeping Britain tied to its past. That was the accusation that was being made.
I mean, you have to wonder if, you know, I say if the late Queen had been alive to hear it and to see it, you wonder whether members of the royal family did watch any of this yesterday, or are just sort of kind of leaving it to their teams to watch and report back, or have had a look at the newspapers.
Well, I know this. I know that William and Kate have been briefed on what was in it. I don't think we'll ever be told if they actually watched it themselves, but you know, they have iPads, they have mobile phones.
Well, they've definitely seen the papers this morning as well. They know what's on the front pages this morning. There's no doubt about that.
And you know, the King was out and about yesterday, so I wonder whether the Queen Consort Camilla just snuck out her iPad and had a quick watch, like I did, watched it on 1.5 speed on Netflix. It means you can actually get through it quite quickly.
I don't know how you did that. I had to watch it on normal speed and keep rewinding.
I was under pressure on Good Morning Britain yesterday to watch as much as I could before we went back into the studio to sort of talk about what we'd seen. So I actually managed to get through in 45 minutes. I think I managed to get through an episode and a half, actually, watching it at 1.5 speed. So so when we went back into the studio, 45 minutes later at 9:15, I'd watched at least quite a bit. But actually, the biggest, I mean, the first part of the first episode was all about their love story. We find out they met on Instagram, which is, you know, Harry must have some spoof Instagram account.
Yeah, and that we heard about their first dates, the proposal. There's a slightly grainy video, isn't there, of Harry on one knee. He says he was surrounded by 15 electric candles. One thing I found interesting, though, was that he said that he had to propose in the UK because that's where his grandmother was, and he had to get permission from his grandmother. But in terms of permission, yes, but William proposed to Kate in Kenya.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there are lots of things, if you were to unpick every single word that Harry and Meghan said, that you could challenge, and that is the problem with documentaries that don't challenge everything they've said. Like, for example, with Oprah Winfrey, were they ever challenged at any point about some of the accusations they made in that program?
There were a few slight digs at the family, though, weren't there? Although not sort of an all-out assault, but there were definite digs throughout the series. One was about marriage, that for some people in the family there's a temptation to marry someone who would fit the mould as opposed to somebody you're perhaps destined to be with. Meghan talks about a dinner with William and Kate for the first time.
Even when Will and Kate came over and I had met her for the first time, they came over for dinner. I remember I was in ripped jeans and I was barefoot. It's like I was a hugger. I've always been a hugger. I didn't realize that is really jarring for a lot of Brits.
So yes, she said, I always thought that Brits were quite sort of formal on the outside, but apparently it carries on over into the inside as well. I mean, being a Brit, I quite like a hug. I think she was being very, very generalist there. I mean, some people may not like hugs. Some people might be a bit formal. Some people might be a bit stiff upper lip. I don't think you can say all of Britain is like that.
Yeah, I think, but I that was just, it's been picked up everywhere as a slight dig at William and Kate and the formality.
I mean, I don't know whether we can sort of see or show this on the podcast, but you won't have to look very far on Twitter or social media to find Meghan's bow to the Queen. We'll play the little sequence, including the big long pause. And if you haven't seen it, I'll build the scene for you. This is Meghan talking about the first time that she met Harry's grandmother, the Queen, and how Harry said, well, you have to bow or curtsy to my grandmother. And she said, what, really? Well, kind of, she's the Queen. So this little sequence we'll play you now is about Harry and Meghan's discussion in the run up to that. Meghan then in front of the camera, and I'm rather surprised I didn't cut this out, in front of the camera does this very, how would you describe it, Lizzie? Very deep bow, and then does a sort of mock sort of accent to talk about how pleased she was to meet the Queen.
Now I'm starting to realize this is a big deal. Like, I curtsied as though I was like, pleasure to meet you, Your Majesty.
So it says at the top of the episode 1, all interviews completed by August 2022. So that does predate the passing of the Queen. Watching that scene though made me quite uncomfortable, and it was quite clear that it made Harry quite uncomfortable. He looked a bit...
Yeah, Harry definitely looked very uncomfortable, doesn't he? I mean, go and have a look at this either on my Twitter or go and look at it on Instagram or something. Harry looked very, very uncomfortable. Now, I mean, okay, the Queen has now passed, but actually, if she been alive, I mean, she would have seen it.
But it would have still been uncomfortable because it was mocking, and
she was one of the preeminent, individuals of the 20th century. To have some element of respect for her isn't that much of a surprise, surely. I mean, you'll have seen, Lizzie, on Twitter and elsewhere, some groups who don't support the monarchy, like Republic, have been saying, well, the whole bowing and curtsying thing is an insult in any case. Why are we doing it? It's completely outdated and stupid and all the rest of it. And why should an American do it? Nevertheless, this was her future husband's grandmother, an elderly woman who had at the time been monarch for something like 68, 69 years. So yes, it all felt a little uncomfortable, to say the least, that section.
And you don't have to bow like that. That it was dramatic and over the top.
You don't have to do what I would call a Theresa May when your knees touch the floor. But maybe a little nod of the head would have been completely suffice. I mean, people are often overdo the whole protocol thing.
I was surprised they kept it in.
I was too, because Harry definitely looked very uncomfortable, and it didn't show Meghan in the best light. Anyway, we shouldn't overly focus on that point, because actually some of the things that Meghan was talking about her, experience, and actually, in terms of what did she say about the press? Let's listen to the bit where she talked about the press. No matter what I did, no matter how good I was, the press were out to, in her words, destroy me.
But truth be told, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how good I was, no matter what I did, they were still going to find a way to destroy me.
So were the press out to destroy her? Well, this comes back to the argument and the debates that's been opened up about, well, were the press or are the press still unkind to Meghan because of her heritage, because of her being biracial or mixed race, as some people say, or mixed heritage? I think that is a debate to be had, but one that clearly Meghan believes, Harry believes, her mother believes, and many of the contributors to the programme believe.
Yeah, the first time we've actually heard from Doria, actually, isn't it? She's never spoken publicly before, and she said, when we first hear from her, that she wants to sort of give a little bit of her side as Meghan's mother. But there's that conversation we played it a little bit earlier where she said to Meghan, this is, as far as I'm concerned, about race. And Meghan says to her, well, I don't want it to be, and her mum says, well, but that's what it's about.
And that's coming down the pike, she said. I had to sort of kind of work out what coming down the pike was. It refers to coming down the turnpike, which is the name of a toll road, actually from the UK at first, but one that the Americans have adopted. So I had to look it up. It means coming down the track. And the turnpike, incidentally, was the gate that would turn if you paid the toll in order to go along the road. Anyway, detail on turnpike. That's why you tuned into this documentary, to this podcast. What about what Harry said about the Nazi uniform? We haven't covered that yet, and it's probably the only time in the whole 3 hours that there was any element of contrition.
Yeah, because there was a section he's talking about the family, actually, and he's talking about how sometimes in this family you are part of the problem rather than part of the solution, and there is a huge level of unconscious bias. And at that point...
Doesn't he accuse the family of being racist? He accused them of having a lot of unconscious bias.
Exactly, yeah.
Kind of by admission that he did as well. As a boy who grew up in the royal family and went to Eton, as we should point out.
In this family, sometimes, you're part of the problem rather than part of the solution. And there is a huge level of unconscious bias.
And after he was speaking about unconscious bias, he then went on to address this whole issue of the Nazi uniform that he wore as a younger individual.
Yeah, describing it as one of the biggest mistakes of his life, didn't he?
It was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I felt so ashamed afterwards. All I wanted to do was make it right.
So while we're on the family, Harry, I mean, he wasn't particularly glowing about his father. He didn't mention him by name, but when he was talking about growing up, and we've just discussed earlier about Harry saying some of his earliest memories were of the paparazzi, but we got on to the bit about his mother dying and how, in his words, he didn't think he was particularly well looked after.
Yeah, I think he sort of talked about not having much support or much guidance. I thought it was quite striking that across 3 hours, we didn't hear him talk about his father at all. Yet we did hear him talk about his mother. He spoke about Diana's awesomeness, how Meghan reminded him of his mother, how well they would have got on. There's a bit where one of the children, I think it's Archie, is being shown a photograph of Diana. The baby's being held by Meghan, being shown a picture of Diana. And he doesn't he, about how much Africa meant to him growing up and how important Africa was. We know that already. He's spoken about that before. But he talks about how sort of the friends he made in Africa almost helped to bring him up.
Being a young boy who was trying to deal with the loss of his mum without much support or help or guidance, it didn't seem right. It didn't seem fair.
And that led on to a sequence in Lesotho with Prince Seeiso, who'd also recently lost his mother when Harry first met him. And that was kind of where Harry felt like he really did get a proper chance to sort of grieve and live out of the spotlight, and suggest he was very happy, as he was in the army as well. Some of his sort of happier times were all being outside the royal family, which says a lot about quite how unhappy he was even before Meghan came onto the scene.
Yeah, I thought it was just really striking how little Charles was mentioned across the 3 hours. Did you?
Yes, and at no point do they say, "Oh, we're really pleased that he stood in for my father when he pulled out of the wedding." Well, maybe this will come in other documentaries, but at no point did they say, "Oh, we were really touched that he stood in for Thomas Markle when the then Prince Charles met Meghan in St George's Chapel."
And actually, didn't Charles took Harry to Africa, didn't he? After Diana's death, so I think
maybe introduced his love for Africa.
Yeah, we've still got another 3 to go, which were trailered at the end of this 3, and this is going to, in Meghan's words, address the difference between the family and the family business and the conflict, she says, between the two.
This is when a family and a family business are in direct conflict.
And what about the engagement interview? It was organised on the day that they announced their engagement, and they had the photo call, and then they went and did the interview with the BBC's Michelle Hussein, who is a very well-respected journalist from the Today programme. Turns out Meghan didn't really like it at all.
In your engagement interview,
Orchestrated reality show. Yep.
So an orchestrated reality show, in her words, which is quite ironic given the Netflix docuseries could be described as an orchestrated reality show. I mean, yes, they sat down for an interview. There are reports this morning. The BBC are describing her description of it as simply untrue. That it was how she described it.
And they were asked to see the ring. Well, of course they're going to ask to see the ring. If you're going to do an engagement interview, you talk about the ring. And Harry did, and said, it was set with whatever stones and diamonds from his mother's collection, and one of the stones came from Africa, whatever it was. But I mean, what's wrong with that? That's quite normal in an engagement interview to talk about the ring and how you met. I think her first question was how you met, or how did you propose? I mean, what makes that an orchestrated reality show? Yeah,
I mean, I got the impression actually she was talking about more than just the interview. I think she was talking about the whole, out in the sunken garden where we were there, weren't we? Watched them come out for that photo call. Well. And I remember I was talking about how they'd chosen to do it actually differently to how William and Kate had done it, and at somewhere that had meant so much to Princess Diana.
This is Meghan Markle who just walked off the red carpet previously as an actress, so who was used to press and cameras and.
But I think the key here is
newspaper publications.
Did they feel that it was under their control, which goes back to the earlier conversation we had about how they like to do things sort of their way. Did they feel like they were doing something because it had been done before?
A bit like what you choose to wear when you are going on royal engagement, because you can't wear the same colour as the Queen. Is that actual protocol, or maybe it's just, well, no one probably wants to wear the same colour even when you go to weddings or whatever it is. But clearly it suggested that Meghan had a problem with other people taking priority, like other senior members of the family got to choose their outfits before she did, and therefore by implication she said she always ended up wearing camels or beiges
more
or
neutral
whites.
colours.
I think that will be addressed in the next 3 episodes. You hear in one of the trailers Harry talking about the hierarchy of the family.
Yeah. Well, and there is a hierarchy. I mean, if you're going to join the royal family, surely you understand that the Queen comes first. And after the Queen comes the heir to the throne, and after him comes Prince William, as was, and then Harry and Meghan. I mean, do you need that explained to you that the Queen takes precedent in a royal family? And that hierarchy now means the king is at the top, of course. And we saw the king yesterday on the day of the Netflix came out. He did a couple of events in King's Cross, one at an Ethiopian church. He was with the Archbishop of Canterbury. It was actually a very diverse audience that he was with, and one that actually was in the schedules before the Harry and Meghan announced that they were doing their Netflix on the day they did. But no comment from him. He just ploughed on, carried on. Someone shouted at him, "Have you spoken to Harry?" But it was ignored or not heard.
No, it was very much business as usual for the royal family yesterday, and they decided that at this stage they are not going to respond. They are going to stay quiet, which otherwise it becomes this tit for tat, doesn't it? And Harry and Meghan say one thing, the royal family respond. Harry and Meghan respond, where does it end? So,
talking of tit for tat, there has been some tit for tat between the palace and Netflix over exactly whether or not, because if you at the very beginning of episode 1, you see the royal family was contacted and asked if they wished to respond. They did not. Not true to the royal family. We haven't been, and no member of the royal family has been contacted. And then we got a slightly different response, which was actually we did receive an email from an unverified address from a production company, and we sought clarification with Netflix and Archie Productions, but never heard back from them. So it's not quite clear what happened there.
In the absence of kind of any verification of that email, they were unable to provide any kind of response. But other than that, yesterday there was no response from the palace, not like post Oprah, that recollections may vary statement that was put out at the time. But let's see, we've got another 3 episodes to go.
You would have thought that someone from Archibald would have actually contacted the palace. They do know who the head of communications is, rather than send an email to media@buckinghampalace.com or whatever they did. You would have thought that they would have contacted them directly. But anyway, so that's, and Netflix then got back in touch, and sources at Netflix told me that actually no, we did contact them and we stand by what we said. So
yep, I mean it's one of the first things you see, isn't it, that when the series starts, you see that when it was all recorded, and then the next thing is that members of the royal family declined to comment, and there are no members of the royal family that take part in this at all. That's probably of no great surprise to anyone.
Interestingly, that Netflix chose to put that up at the very, very beginning of this documentary, but they don't put up in front of the Crown. Most of what you see here is fiction. So different approach by Netflix for different programs. Anyways, there we are. So 3 more episodes next week. The book is due out after Christmas. By all accounts, we're hearing that book's going to be even more damaging than the Netflix series. This story has not, whether you like this or not, this story has not come to an end by any way, shape or form.
You have to wonder when it will. Like, you have to wonder when they've said everything. because after 6 episodes, an hour each, and a book and some very high-profile interviews, you have to wonder, at what point do they think, you know what, we've said everything that we wanted to say. You've had our truth, in their words.
There we are, their side of the story. Will we ever get the other side, or will it just be left? Never complain, never explain. Who knows? Right, so next week there are 3 more. We will dissect them in due course, or I will certainly find someone to dissect them with.
Yep, I'm afraid I won't be here next week. I'm away on holiday, but I'm sure you can chat it through with somebody else.
I'm sure there'll be lots of people wanting to chat about this next week. So
sure.
enjoy your holiday and
Thank you.
your vacation.
I will.
And
Thank you very much.
we will see you when you return.
Yes, I will. I'll see you in the new year. So thank you for listening this year and for joining us again. And we will see you soon.